And we're back. Hey everybody, today I'm going to take you on a little field trip. We're going to go out to one of the San Joaquin Valley's premier nurseries that sells bare root fruit trees when that season is going on, which is right now in Zone 9. It's going to be a fun day. Let's go out and learn all about this process, how you can save money and plant a small orchard or just one tree in your backyard and start growing your own food. We've arrived at White Forest Nursery in Bakersfield, California, and we're going to talk to the master of bare root season that'll answer all of our questions, Jerry White. Jerry, it's good to see you.
Thank you very much.
We've been shopping here for many years and we really love the product, and we just thought it would be fun to take today's video about bare root season and have you describe to the viewers what it means, what we do, and what's different about it than buying a potted plant.
Sounds like a good plan. Let's get started.
First off, everybody's going to ask, what does bare root mean? Is it a different kind of tree? What does that mean, that this tree grows with its roots bare?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because bare root is not as common as it used to be. It used to be that, 20, 30, 40 years ago, people would find that and it'd be a normal thing. Now we go around and we're about the only people in Kern County that have true bare root anymore. And what does that mean? Well, that means you've got a tree here and it's sitting in this beautiful sawdust, keep it moist, and look, the roots are kind of bare. So the neat thing about bare root is you look really close, see these little teeny white roots here, it's already starting to grow, and it's only been in this bin for about a week or so. So bare root is a neat plant for several reasons. First off, you get the widest selection as you can get as possible for the year. So many varieties, like there's probably 8 or 10, 9 varieties of apples, there's 7 or 8 varieties of apricots, and peaches, and nectarines, and plums, and pluots, and on and on. So that's nice as you get to what you want. But the second thing is with bare root, it's very light. I'm just picking up this tree, it's pretty easy, pretty much anybody can handle it. So that's really good. The third thing that's kind of neat is they're more economical. This is the cheapest time of year to purchase the tree. You're not paying for the extra dirt, the can, and the handling, and the extra time to get this rooted out. You're getting it directly from the field, put it in here, and so it's a wonderful way to get lots of different kinds of trees.
That sounds good, Jerry. When is bare root season? Is it just one time a year, or is it something that can happen all the time?
Well, that's wonderful, because the downside of bare root is a very short period of time. So plants and trees, their bare root have to be deciduous, means they have to lose their leaves in the wintertime, so it's dormant right now. It's basically asleep. So we can actually take it and take the dirt off and transport it. So it's a very short time year, which means when they lose their leaves. So typically bare root trees are available about the 1st of January to maybe the middle, at the latest, the end of February.
Would that be true? That's true in our location, which is what, Zone 9 or 9B, I've heard it called sometimes?
8, whichever you want to look at.
Okay.
Yes.
But that would change, what you just described would change across the United States. Different growing areas would have a different bare root season.
Absolutely. So in the warm seasons, what we're talking about here, the warm growing areas. But if you get into the north, you get Fargo, North Dakota, for example, I mean, bare root season might continue until probably March, April, or even into the 1st of May.
Okay, that sounds good. And what type of plants are available in bare root, Jerry? I know that we talk a lot about fruit trees and some berry bushes and that types of things. Is bare root season just kind of exclusive to those kinds of plants?
Well, you've got other things. I mean, you have some roses, for example. I mean, here we have some tree roses, for example, and bush roses. So you've got other deciduous things can be available in bare root. You don't see as many, and a few shade trees might be available that way too. But yeah, berries and fruit trees and roses are pretty much what the extent of it is.
Okay. And so if we were to summarize, what is the advantage of buying bare root fruit trees and berries versus potted plants? I think you've touched on some of that.
It's cheap. I mean,
cheap.
No, that's not it. It's quite the opportunity to do it with much less labor and to have the selection. And it's cheap.
Gotcha. Is there any type of growing advantage? Now, I know I've planted bare root fruit trees that have done very well. Some of them even produce fruit the first year.
Yes.
The first growing year after they were planted.
That's right.
And it seems like that was better than a lot of potted plants that I've bought. So is there some difference there?
There is. So when you're getting a bare root tree, the roots are not constricted, they're not winding around, they're not pot bound. So when they do start growing, like this one just now is, as we saw a little bit earlier, they take off and grow up much quicker, much faster, much more vigorous.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's say that people are watching the video, they've decided they want to plant a bare root tree, they've checked in their area, they've found out what the season is, or they've come to White Forest Nursery here in Bakersfield, California.
Possibly.
How do we buy a bare root fruit tree? What are the steps when we arrive?
So you need to decide what you want. So we make that decision, like you said, write it down. Hey, I want an apple, I want a plum, I want a pluot, I want a blueberry, some of the unusual fruits. Great. Then come on in, check with us or your local nursery, and let us help you pick the varieties. Now the neat thing is that the reason we carry 15 varieties of peaches is that we can pick a variety that you want, whether it be white or yellow meated. We can pick it in the ripening time that you want. So peaches can ripen anywhere from probably late April on some varieties up to the end of October, and pretty much everything in between.
Well, and I think that's a good segue into the next question. There are things to know when we're going to plant a fruit tree in our yard.
Yes.
Growing zone, chill hours, all these things might be very intimidating to a new grower or somebody that wants to start out. So what does growing zone and chill hours mean, and how do I know if the plant is right for my area and chill hours?
Well, talk to your local nursery, that's number one. But secondly is you can look on the tags, you can look on the websites. We get a good portion of our trees from Dave Wilson. You can go to davewilson.com and look it up there. But what it means is certain trees don't grow in certain areas. So for example, if you happen to live along the beach and you never get any cool weather at all, well, most fruit trees won't grow there. There are some exceptions. There's some that have been developed for very low chill environments. On the other hand, if I happen to live in the top of the mountain, say top of Breckenridge or something like that, and it gets to minus 20 degrees, or if I'm in Fargo, North Dakota, some of the other varieties, some of the peach varieties, for example, or certainly apricots, they don't grow as well there. In Kern County, we happen to be very blessed in that we can grow the largest selection of pretty much anything in the world here.
Yeah, this is a great growing area for sure here in the San Joaquin Valley. Jerry, what does self-fruitful versus needing a pollinizer mean?
That's a wonderful question, because a lot of times people go into the big box store or something like that and pick out the tree and go and put it in the ground, and it's a beautiful tree, but it doesn't get any fruit. Well, some varieties of fruit need to have what's called cross-pollination. They have to have another variety. The pollen from the flowers on that other tree need to combine with the flowers from the tree that you want to produce that fruit. On the other hand, there are other varieties that are self-fruitful, that they just have to have one tree and they'll fruit just wonderfully. So that's a real important thing to look at.
Absolutely. And I just want to say, I'm not being paid or connected with White Forest Nursery in any way, but I have bought bare root trees from big box stores and things like that in the past, and I'm here to say there is a significant difference between buying stuff like that and coming to a professional nursery where these guys really know what they're doing. You're wasting your time in many cases on buying those discount plants and bushes at the big box stores. Now there's my soapbox for the minute on that.
I appreciate it. But one reason is that an independent nursery will pick the varieties that are good for the area, number one, but they also pick the varieties that usually they like and think are good. I pick all these varieties. I get to choose from this whole vast list of which ones we're going to stock, and I pick the things that I think are good. I don't pick the varieties that I think are bad.
Right. Yeah, and I'm thinking those big box chains, because of distribution throughout their companies and all that, you never know what you're going to end up with in your area.
Unfortunately, true.
Yeah. Okay, Jerry, I've selected a tree that will work in my area. I've looked at chill hours, and I've looked at my pollinizing needs. I've purchased it, and what do I need to do now? I'm driving home with my tree. What are some tips we need to know about?
So one thing that's different about bare root is it doesn't have protection, basically. So when you purchase it, we're going to take this and we'll pull the trees out and we'll put it in a plastic bag with some moist sawdust to keep this moist, but you need to get it planted that day or the latest the next day. You don't just throw it into the garage and just let it sit there for a couple of weeks or a month. Some people do that. They don't grow very well that way. So you got to get it in the ground. So I recommend you pre-dig your holes before you come in so that you take care of the hard part. And basically, you're going to dig a hole that's about twice the size of the root system, about twice as wide and twice as deep. We're going to take a planting mix, a compost or a mulch, and mix it about half mulch, half of the existing dirt. And we're not going to plant it too deep. We're going to plant it right here. You see where these roots are coming off right here? Just above that. And a lot of times there'll be a color differential. You can see how this is kind of dark. This has been underground when it was in the nursery and being grown, and this was above ground. Well, it wants to be in the same spot. So we're going to plant it right there. Not here, not here, right there. So that's number one. That's critical because it's harder to tell. And then we're going to take a good planting mix like we talked about to get those roots started. And lastly, we're going to use a product like Garden Max to infuse it with life in that soil so it actually grows.
Garden Max is a fertilizer or a compost of some kind?
Garden Max is a soil amendment that actually infuses the soil with the biology and has a little bit of fertilizer on it. It's something that can make a difference between this tree producing in 3 years from now or this tree producing 1 year from now.
Absolutely. Okay, and you know that answered part of my next question about how do I plant it. But Jerry, is location important in my yard? Can I just put a tree wherever I think I have room?
Well, make sure you have room, number one. I see many times the trees put within 12 inches of a house or so. Probably not good.
What about sunlight considerations?
You need at least a half a day of sun for most trees, minimally. If it's in full shade, you know, it may still be alive, but it's not going to produce well or grow well or look good. And then the other thing is that you want allowable room so that you get around that tree.
Sounds good.
When to cough.
And how about close to other trees, Jerry? Is there any consideration about how close we're planting these things together?
Well, so the aspects you want to look at when closing the other trees is first, make sure it isn't shading it. Sometimes people put it next to a mature tree, put it maybe on the north side of the tree and it never gets any sun. So that's number one. But number two, if you're looking for a pollinizer, most trees are bee pollinated. So the closer the better to some great extent. So you want to be able to get the bees going from one tree to another. But if you're limited in space, you can actually take and put 3 trees in the same hole.
Really?
It's a great thing.
Huh.
Put them in a kind of a triangular fashion. Here we've got a beautiful Granny Smith apple hill here, but maybe I want to do a mutsu because I like to make sauce. Look at that beauty. And then, hey, gee, I like Fuji really well. Let's put a Fuji or a Dorset Golden, which is Dorset Golden's one of the earliest variety of apple striping. And we'll simply dig a little bit bigger hole, put it in the hole, kind of lean them out just at a little bit of an angle, and in the same space that you would normally have 1 tree, you have 3, which will ripen at different times and you have much more fruit.
That's very interesting, and you could solve your pollinizing needs that way as well, very
Totally
simply.
takes care of it. Yes.
Okay. Jerry, we've bought a bare root tree, we've taken it home, we've got our hole dug, we've stuck it in there with our amendment that you recommended. Should I do any pruning, or what should I do to that tree once we've got to that point?
Yes, you should.
Okay.
So this tree was growing in the field, and what happens when they dig it, some of the roots that were on this tree originally have been cut off just to be able to get it out of that hole. Well, it's very important to balance the root system with the top. So we don't want to have a giant top and not much root. So this doesn't have too much to look at. So we're going to look at this tree right here. This is a beauty. This is Dorset Golden, which is one of the earliest yellow apples. So first off, we want to determine and tell the tree what we want. I've had a lot of people say, I'm just going to take it home and we'll see what the tree wants to be. No, 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 no. You're the master. Take care of it. So first off, I want to know how high you want your branching. You know, commercially, you're going to do it about knee high because they don't like jumping so much, and I don't jump as high as I used to. And so, but you may have a spot that you need to be close to, and you want it up a little higher. Maybe you want it waist high. Maybe you want it starting at chest high. That's the difference, and now's the time to figure that. So, for example, and we'll just basically cut those branches off, bring it to the level we want. So this is going to end up around knee high after I've planted it, but knee high.
Okay.
But, so now I'm going to have these branches, and I want 3 to 5 scaffolding branches. That's what we're going to leave. So we're going to go through and take the ones above that off. People get upset about that.
They feel like they just lost half their tree.
They do. They usually warn them, but in this case I didn't. And then what we'll do is we'll shorten up the side branches. And the reason for this is twofold. First off, I'm going to put the branches where I want it. Secondly is, since I'm balancing the top with the roots, what's going to grow now is going to take off much more quickly, much more vigorously. It's going to put the branches where I want it, and it's going to do what we want, produce fruit.
sounds good. I have a very small backyard, and I know that when I planted my Burgundy plum that I bought here 4 or 5 years ago.
Yes.
And by the way, we haven't really talked about standard, semi-dwarf, and all of that. So we'll touch on that. But mine was a semi-dwarf with very limited space, and I chopped it knee high like you just described. I got a nice vase type shape to the tree, and I'm able to hold that thing at about 12 feet high or so, and I get just hundreds of plums off it every year.
And that's it. So, you know, if the tree's going 20, 25 feet tall and you're not jumping very high, why are you spending the time and the effort to grow those fruits on the top, which you're not going to pick anyway, just going to fall and make a mess?
Right.
Control it where you want it.
Absolutely. So you can get bare root trees in semi-dwarf and standard varieties, is that right?
You can. Most are available both ways. Some things aren't. Persimmon's only standard, but some things. And so what the difference is on most fruit trees, what makes it a dwarf or a standard is the rootstock that it's on. This is actually on a rootstock called M7, and that's about a half-size tree. So this tree is still going to go 12, 15 feet, which is bigger than most people need, or as big as they need. If you had a full-size apple, they're going to go 25, 30 feet. Well, if you're looking for a shade tree, that might work. But if you're just looking for fruit, that's too big.
So you could take a semi-dwarf fruit tree and hold it down to a pretty small size. We don't really need to mess around with dwarf fruit trees anymore, do we?
No, I mean, sometimes, let's look right down here. These are dwarf peaches, for example. And what we call genetic dwarf. If I took a branch of this tree and stuck it in the ground, and if it would root, and it probably wouldn't, but if it did root, it would stay exactly the same. This tree, on the other hand, is dwarfed by the rootstock itself. So that's what's controlling it. The neat thing about something like this, if you have a container, or you've got a very small place, or you want to use an ornamental, they're beautiful. So they only go about 4 to 6 feet tall.
Perfect. Somebody with an apartment or a condo or something with a small patio, that might be ideal for them.
That's right.
Okay, Jerry, I'm sure as any retail business, you probably have problems sometimes with confusion with customers after they've purchased something. What really can we expect from our fruit tree the first year? I'm thinking about somebody that may come in and say, I bought this tree, I didn't get any fruit off of it.
Well, that's an excellent question. So first off, hopefully you picked the right variety. That's what we've done all up to this point. But secondly is you got to take care of that tree. And one of the biggest things is the planting. We talked about the mulch in the hole, we talked about the Guard Max. And a lot of times you could just get away, you dig a hole, put it in the ground and cover it up with dirt. A lot of times it'll grow. But it depends when you want fruit. Usually it'd be the 3rd or 4th year if you did that, before the tree took off and really fruited well. If, on the other hand, you dig that nice hole, put the mulch in, the Guard Max on top, and come back and feed it with an organic fertilizer about every 6 weeks for the first year, you'll have fruit in the first year to the second year. So it just depends what your 2 or 3 years of your life is worth.
Right, and so just because you don't see a big huge crop of apples or nectarines or plums or whatever you've bought right off the bat the first year doesn't mean you got a bum tree.
Does not mean you have a bum tree. A lot of it depends on how you take care of it.
Absolutely. This year I've added a couple of red heritage raspberries in our yard in a couple of tubs that we bought last week. And this bare root fruit season doesn't just end with trees. There are all kinds of berries and other products available. Tell us about that, Jerry.
Well, yes, you can get bare root in berries. And for example, here's a really nice raspberry here, and look at that root system.
Wow.
And you can see just as well in this, nice white roots are starting to take off and grow. So it's a really great way to get the selection, the economics like we talked about before, but it doesn't end just with bare root. Is a lot of the growers now are just now starting to grow in containers. We call these deep 4-inch pots. Now, why should I do this? Well, first off, there's almost no losses. There's almost zero loss with this because you've got the whole root system intact here. It hasn't been yanked out of the ground. But the main difference is I can plant it when I want it. I don't have to plant it the same day. I can throw it in that garage for those 2 weeks and still have it survive very nicely. And I can plant it even in the middle of summer. So you've got a wider variety of planting times, along with a really good selection.
Yeah, this selection is huge. We can get pomegranates, we can get blackberries, raspberries, there are blueberries in these containers, jostaberries, which I've never heard of, black currants, we've got York elderberry, on and on it goes.
And there's a few other things. You have a beautiful pile of sawdust, right? And you might even get some asparagus.
Oh, okay.
Look at those beauties, also just starting to grow.
Interesting. So we can buy a bare root asparagus.
Yes.
Interesting.
You
How
like
long do those last once you plant them?
Years. I mean, 20 years type thing.
Really?
If you take care of them properly. So
Okay.
really worth doing. I mean, sometimes you buy a head of lettuce. You get a head of lettuce, but with asparagus, you plant it down the furrow, put the mulch in, that type of thing, and it's going to be there for many, many years to come.
Okay. You know, Jerry, we've talked about a lot of stuff today, and I think we've covered most questions that people would have, but is there any common mistakes that you want to talk about that people make in bare root plants, or just planting fruits and berries and things in general?
Well, proper location is important, number one. A lot of people like to put their fruits in the lawn. It can be done, but that's where I see the losses, number one, when people put in the lawn. Because your watering practices on your lawn, you're watering every day or every second day, you get all this massive amount of water, and the worst thing in the world is people plant it down low so it has its natural little trough, right? Well, all this water from many feet away is flowing down into that hole, and you end up drowning things. That's the first thing. The second thing is plant the right depth. Because we don't have that soil line to see, it's a little more difficult. Just take a look at that plant. Find where that color change was. Find where the roots are going and where the stem's going. And those are the two major mistakes, other than not feeding. Fertilize your fruit trees, get them to grow, and they're going to reward you with more fruit much sooner, and much more healthy, nutritious fruit. All the difference in the world.
That sounds good. And while we have the expert here teaching us, Jerry, what about watering? You mentioned overwatering just now, and I think that might be a problem that is more common than we think.
It really is. I mean, the thing is we get the trees in the ground, and when they're bare root, there's no leaves on them. So we'll take and water them real well when we put them in the ground. I mean, we'll mud them in, flood it in, so you get all those air pockets out and that type of thing. And then we will not water again until actually the leaves start coming on. People want to water every week or every other day type thing, and what happens is that water gets in there, they don't get any air, and they drown.
Interesting. So a plant can drown in the ground.
Doesn't have the air, flooded with water, yes, it drowns and rots.
Okay. All right, Jerry, I appreciate your help in teaching us all about bare root. It's a wonderful time of year. We never miss it. We come to White Forest every year, and we always inevitably buy something, even though our yard is shrinking each year. We're having less and less room, but we enjoy. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But you know, we've gotten rid of a lot of grass, and we've put in fruit trees and berries in its place, and we've come to find out that the watering is less because we have drip irrigation on these plants instead of watering a big lawn.
That's right.
And we're able to get a lot of food and enjoy a lot of produce and products right out of our backyard.
Well, and finally, with the thing about having your own produce and own fruits is, first off, they're going to taste better because you're picking them when they're ripe, not when the supermarket or the grower grew them and you can bounce them and make nice baskets with them. You're going to have more nutrition because you're using the organic fertilizers. There's for sure going to be more food value in the fruit that you grow than what you're getting at the supermarket. And lastly, you're controlling the environment. You know if you put pesticides on. You're not just eating a random piece of fruit that may have come from Peru or somewhere like that where they've nuked the doggone things and purported it as organic.
Absolutely. Jerry, thank you for all the information, and I hope everybody learned something out of this today, and I hope it encouraged you to get out in the yard, come by a nursery like White Forest Nursery, get some bare root stuff, and try growing fruits and berries and other vegetables, even in containers or something in your small yard, and you'll get to enjoy the harvest from this for years to come. Hey, we had a lot of fun on today's field trip. Jerry gave us a lot of good information out at White Forest Nursery. Here's a plum tree right behind me that I planted bare root about 4 years ago. You can see the crotch height down there is about right where he told you to prune those things, about knee high. And you can see how the canopy grows up and provides a nice sized tree for the average yard grower, and it gives you a lot of fruit. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button down below if you appreciate the content that we provided in today's video. And as always, remember, get ready so that you and your family can succeed and thrive.